Good evening and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting, Monday, 9th of May 2022. I would like to make a statement before we start our council meeting. At the last council meeting on the 26th of April, I declared an adjournment to allow councillors to consider a legal matter in camera. Council's governance rules allow for such actions, and I am proud to say that Greater Dandenong rarely uses any such procedures. It is an extremely rare thing for this council to adjourn or to meet in camera. The media has reported a private legal action between a Greater Dandenong councillor and a Greater Dandenong resident. On the 26th of April, we found that both parties to this matter were in proximity in the chamber, and I felt it important that we adjourn to be clear on any issues or implications for either party. We adjourned, we spoke privately to each of the parties, we heard their perspectives, and we discussed the matter briefly, in camera, with all councillors. Arising from that proper and respectful process, we concluded that the meeting could continue without any intervention or change and reopened and reconvened. We respect the privacy of the parties in working through the matter before them and will make no further comment. I apologise, as I did the last meeting, for any inconvenience caused by the necessary adjournment. Thank you. We'll get onto the agenda, councillors. Item 1, meeting opening. 1.1, attendance. Mr Benny, are there any apologies?
Yes, Mayor and Councillors, there are two apologies this evening. The first is from Councillor Lloyd Trong. The second is from Councillor Lana Formoso, and who will remain an apology up until a leave of absence is formally confirmed by resolution of this council, and that will be addressed at item 4.3.4 of the meeting this evening. And it should be noted that Councillor Lim is in attendance, but he is online this evening and not live in the chamber. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Item 1.2, acknowledgement of traditional owners of the land. Council acknowledges the traditional and custodians of this land, the Bunurong people, and pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, while also recognising their deep and continuing connections to climate, culture and country. We also pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their elders and acknowledge their journey. Item 1.3, offering of prayer, reflection or affirmation. As part of Council's commitment to recognising the cultural and spiritual diversity of our community, the prayer, reflection or affirmation this evening will be offered by Sister Vijay Avani Vijay Kumar from the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, a member of the Greater Dandenong Interfaith Network. Please stand.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you.
So, Om Shanti is a greeting of peace. I will start with this reflection of Om Shanti and end the reflection with Om Shanti. So first, breathe in peace. Breathe out any tension. So breathe in peace and breathe out any tension. Now relax your body. Relax your feet, your shoulders, your neck, and your thinking, and your mind. Relax them all. Then waken a memory of your deepest feeling of peace and calm. Remember, listen to it. Allow the calm feelings to flow into you and through you. Connect to this feeling of the deep peace and calm. Absorb it. Fill yourself with this feeling. Gently return to your innermost peaceful and calm place. Finally, feeling refreshed and empowered from the peaceful feeling of your calm center, let this feeling of calm and peace flow out into your life and to the atmosphere of this meeting you are sharing this evening. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Wiyajalani. We'll move on to 1.4, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting of Council held on the 26th of April 2022. Moved by Deputy Mayor Foster. Second by Councillor Garrard. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. 2. Officers' Reports, Part 1, 2.1, Documents for Sealing, 2.1.1, Documents for Sealing. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we'll just go back to one item. I missed that one item. Item 1.5, Disclosures of Interest. Mr. Benny.
Mayor and Councillors, there is a single disclosure of interest this evening. It is from the Mayor, Councillor Jim Mametti. It relates to item 2.3.1, Town Planning Application 37 Benga Avenue, Dandenong, PLNs 21/05 or 0535. The type of interest is a direct material conflict of interest of a pecuniary nature. The nature of the interest is that Councillor Mametti's wife is a director of the company that owns the property. The Mayor will be required to vacate the chair and leave the chamber for the item. Thank you, Mayor.
Item 2, Officers' Reports, Part 1, 2.1, Documents for Sealing, 2.1.1, Documents for Sealing.
Happy
Moved
to
by
move it.
Councillor Garrard,
Second it.
second by Councillor Tan. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. 2.2, Documents for Tabling, 2.2.1, Petitions and Joint Letters. Moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Councillor Long. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 2.3, Statutory Planning Applications, 2.3.1, Town Planning Application, number 37, Benga Avenue, Dandenong, Planning Application number PLN 21/0535. Councillors, I have a conflict of interest, direct material conflict of interest, that my wife is a director of a company that owns a property in Benga Avenue. So I will move from the seat and Deputy Mayor Foster will take over. Thank you.
Okay, and do we have any movers for this item? Thank you, Councillor. Moved by Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Garrard. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition?
I do have a question. Thank you.
Councillor.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just to the relevant officer, could you please give an update on one of the objections regarding to stormwater management, flooding into the adjacent properties? Thanks.
Mr. Thorley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Could I just clarify what the question was, Councillor Tan?
So one of the objections is regarding to stormwater management flooding onto adjacent of the properties. So what's the outcome on that? Thanks.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, the conditions 8 and I believe 11 of the application are permit conditions in relation to control of stormwater runoff from the property to adjacent properties must be to a lawful point of discharge. Other than that, I'm not sure if there's anything further that you are asking, Councillor Tan.
So is that not a major concern with the stormwater?
Through you, Madam.
Mr. Thorley. Yeah.
No, we don't believe it's been conditioned accordingly to contain that stormwater to a lawful point of discharge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any other questions? Any opposition? As there's no opposition, I declare this item carried. And can we please bring in Mayor Mehmeti?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foster. Item 3, question time public. Mr. Benny.
The first question this evening is from Leah Anderson of Dandenong. I hear that there is going to be a large number of mature trees removed by council at the corner of Hemming Street and Robinson Street to build a car park. Even if new trees are planted, they may take 20 years to undo the damage. Can you please explain what, where and why is this occurring, given council's objective to increase tree canopy cover? Mr Kearsley will respond, Mr Mayor.
Mr. Kearsley.
Thank you, and I thank the resident for the question. Building on the answer, which was also tabled at the meeting on the 11th of April, I can advise that Council is proposing a number of initiatives to improve perceptions of safety in this particular precinct as part of the implementation of the Hemming Street Precinct Action Plan. Further details are available on Council website. The works are not related to a car park, as the resident has referred to, but seek to improve sightlines, public lighting amenity and allow for the use of CCTV along Hemming Street. Community notification for the proposed tree planting works was communicated to local residents in late March. This notification outlined the project inclusion of removal and replacement of 61 trees and the planting of 25 additional trees, resulting in a total of 86 new trees in Hemming Street between Robinson Street and Bulong Street, and in Weller Street the planting of 16 new trees, including the removal and replacement of 10 trees and the planting of 6 additional trees. This would see a total of 71 trees removed, but a total of 102 new trees planted in the area. No trees have been removed at this time, and based on feedback received, councillors reviewing a number of options for the removal of trees prior to further engagement. I can also advise that community consultation on this particular project is scheduled for the 1st of June from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. here at the Civic Centre to further discuss the matter with residents. After that time, council will then be briefed further at a councillor briefing session prior to any other decisions being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kearsley. Mr. Benny.
Next question is also from Leah Anderson of Dandenong. With the impending details for Sandown Raceway to be removed within the next 5 years, what is council planning to do with the congestion of Corrigan Road, the flooding zones of Sandown and the heritage of the site? Also, how can residents help council to stop the sale of Sandown? Many people love attending motor sport events and will be saddened to see it go for Greater Dandenong to lose the economic value big race meets bring to our town. Mr Thorley can respond.
Mr. Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your question, Ms Anderson. Once council has received the Minister's Planning's authority to prepare and exhibit the planning scheme amendment, council will be able to put out into the public domain the full extent of details for such upgrades to roads, drainage, heritage matters, amongst other things. The exhibition of the proposed planning scheme amendment will also give all interested parties the opportunity to submit their views, including any opposition or support of the proposal. An exercise of community consultation will be launched once the Minister's authorisation is granted. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Mr Benny.
The next three questions have been submitted by Maria Sampi of Noble Park. Maria Sampi has asked to ask the questions herself, so she may come forward to the microphone and do so.
Thank you, Mr Benny. I'd like to welcome former Councillor Maria Sampi.
Good, thank you. Okay. Council has built the $35,000 pedestrian crossing in Bakers Road, Dandenong North, for the Heritage Hill Kindergarten. It's been installed, but money was also set aside for the conversion of the tennis court closest to the kindergarten to make it into a car park for the 8 teachers that work at the kindergarten. The teachers, when the consultation took place, informed Council that 8 car parking spaces are being occupied by teachers on the street, as there is no parking for the kindergarten, and so the car park is required urgently, and almost 3 years have gone by. When will the car park be built, as it defeats the purpose of having the crossing built first?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you for the question. What I can advise is that the crossing point was installed to benefit both kindergarten parents and students, as well as residents at the aged care facility accessing the Barry Powell Reserve, and is providing an improved road safety outcome for these users. With regards to the next steps, the tennis building has been demolished. Temporary fencing is still on the site as some further park reinstatement works are required, and the car parking design will be undertaken over the next 2 to 3 months. At this point in time, there is no construction funding for the car park, so that will have to wait for further budgetary considerations. However, I can advise that the design of the netball courts, multi-court fencing, coaches box and lighting is part of the Barry Powell Master Plan of Works, and Council has allocated funds for the design of those elements during next financial year, in addition to the design process for the Baines Pavilion on the same reserve will also commence in the year 22-23. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Ms Sampi.
In 2019, money was also set aside of $180,000 to open up the service lane next to Regis Nursing Home car park in Bakers Road, Dandenong North. This was because staff from the nursing home are parking in front of residents' premises in the service road, and there is no opening to the service road. What has happened to that money that was set aside for the opening to be done? Where's the money gone?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you again for the question. The funding for the works to alter the Bakers Road service lane is still allocated to this project. They haven't been used for anything else, and these works are anticipated to occur and be completed later this year. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr Kearsley. Ms Sampi.
Now, in front of the nursing home, since that nursing home has been built, staff park continually on the street from 7 a.m. Council put in 1-hour parking signs about 5 years ago, and I noticed that it does not seem to be supervised on a regular basis. Thus, it affects the parents when they drop and pick up their kids from the kindergarten by the nursing staff occupying the space. How often is the 1-hour parking in front of the nursing home being supervised by Council parking officers to ensure that the 1-hour parking signs are obeyed?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your question, Maria. During 2020 and 2021, Council's parking enforcement activity was reduced significantly, and like elsewhere in Victoria at that time, typically timed parking restrictions were not enforced, and only high priority safety locations, e.g. parking in no stopping areas, were enforced. I can confirm that officers have recommenced parking enforcement for some months now, and I can confirm that in the location you've raised, it forms part of our routine parking patrols.
Okay.
And has been checked several times over the last few months. We've also spoken to management at the facility in the past regarding staff parking, and we'll look to do that again. Council also, I will note, does rely on feedback from the community in the form of complaints to guide us with the level of resources that we allocate to areas. And if cars are observed overstaying in any of the timed areas within our city, we encourage you and the community to report this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Storley.
And finally, Mr Mayor and Mr CEO, I think I deserve an apology for the way that I was treated like a criminal at the last council meeting. By getting security onto me and stuff like that. So I do require an apology from all of you. Thank you.
Please sit down. Ms Sampley, thank you for your questions.
No, it's not a question. I'm after an apology.
Mr Benny?
The next question this evening is from Earl Misso.
So I'm being ignored, am I?
We already made a statement, Ms Sampley. Can you please sit down?
No, it's not a statement.
Ms Sampley,
okay.
you are interrupting our meeting.
No, I'm not
Ms.
interrupting.
Sampley,
I deserve an apology for the way that I was treated, okay? For the simple reason
Ms. Sampley,
you had
sit
plenty
down.
of time to
Ms.
look
Sampley,
at what you were doing.
I've already made a statement and I've acknowledged what happened last week and you're absolutely out of order. Please sit down. Mr Benny?
The next question this evening is from Earl Misso. It refers to a response that I provided to Mr Misso, and he thanks Council for that response that was provided on the 22nd of April. Through reading the letter, whilst you had made some points on how the problem will be addressed, I felt there was no explanation to the answer of my question, which I was greatly disappointed in. As suggested by yourself on the 11th of April to give ear to my questions regarding the interview between you, me, the officer and myself. I was disappointed to see in paragraph 2 of your letter you suggested that Mr Cinquegrana held detailed discussions with Council's traffic engineers that afternoon, as this would not be possible due to the matter only being raised in the evening. If I am proven to be wrong on this fact, I will happily stand corrected. I still am left with a feeling of uneasiness that there is a lack of transparency and adequate responses to the concerns being raised on a regular basis. I am hopeful that this letter can encourage greater thought and consideration when addressing future concerns, and I look forward to hearing about a resolution to the matter. In response, I can advise Mr Misso that, in fact, in relation to the timing of the issue, the matter was not raised for officers' attention for the first time on that night. The matter of cars speeding along Mills Road had been raised on a number of previous occasions, including by the SES themselves, and Councillor were working towards a longer-term resolution that involved Victoria Police and Victoria Police visiting certain industrial properties in the area. We're all, however, concerned to hear of Councillor Formoso's direct experiences, but I say again that the issues that caused her concern were not new, and that is why Mr Cinquegrana was able to discuss the matters on a previous occasion with traffic engineers, and hopefully that puts the timing of that into some particular perspective. Your thoughts certainly have added to the discussion and debate on the matter, and we, like you and all other councillors, are certainly looking forward to hearing about a resolution to this matter. The resolution, as I said a minute ago, will involve Victoria Police doing further work. It will involve, and it has involved, Council's traffic engineers looking at making some modifications on the ground to where vehicles can park and where they may not park. And it also involves us continuing to talk to the SES, as we have, about access, egress issues associated with that property. The final question is also from Earl Misso. It does relate to a matter that the Mayor made a statement about at the commencement of this meeting, but I will read it in its entirety. Looking back to the previous council meeting on the 26th of April, I am compelled to raise an objection to the manner in which we, the people, the ratepayers, were treated. During the meeting, a decision was made that councillors needed to discuss some matters confidentially. A woman who approached us to leave was blatantly rude. She put her hand up and said that we must all leave now or else security would be called. This is the second time that I've experienced this behaviour. Why is this allowed and considered appropriate? Why is it tolerated by the City of Greater Dandenong? There is a polite way of explaining the need to leave, and a please and thank you and a respectful tone of voice is what is required. This would achieve the same outcome in a more congenial manner. Additionally, a person who had been a councillor for more than 20 years and was seated with us was treated in the same dismissive manner. Do you need to provide staff engaging with the public with further training in dealing with ratepayers? When I attend the CGD libraries, my libraries, I am always treated with respect and in a friendly manner. Why does this not extend to council meetings? In your Greater Dandenong Council News booklet, you invite participation and attendance from the public. Do you genuinely want public participation, or is this just a facade to appear to be involved with the public? To involve the public? Finally, the officers got it right. They took the issue of concern to another room for private discussion. Is this not what should have happened from the outset? There should not be a privacy in a public gathering, and the public do have the right to refuse to leave. No matter what the circumstances, however, it is totally unacceptable to be spoken to in the manner that occurred. This question was received only 5 minutes before the council meeting, so I've not had time to structure or frame a response, but I can say in no particular order that Mr Misso received a private and confidential letter from council in relation to some of these matters. I will not in any way elaborate on the content of those details that were conveyed to Mr Misso, but in that we endeavoured to outline some of the issues that arose on that night for him in particular. I'll also add that the Mayor has made a statement at the commencement of this meeting, and in that statement he identified that for a range of reasons we will not be making any further statements. The statement made by the Mayor clearly outlines Council's position in this matter, and there is nothing further to be said in relation to that. However, I will add that in the assertions that have been made, we have checked our facts. We have checked the body camera footage of the officers who were in attendance on that night, and there is evidence that the officer involved used the word please on no less than 9 occasions. And that is demonstrable and detailed in the body camera footage that has been that is held by the council. Finally, I will add, as the Mayor has indicated, that council has a provision under its governance rules to adjourn a meeting to deal with matters that the council considers justified. And in the question, it is stated that the officers got it right, and the issue of concern involved having a private discussion in another room. It was, of course, necessary to adjourn the meeting for that discussion to be held. So there in itself is an explanation as to why the process was an acceptable one. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Benny. We'll move on to item 4, Officers' Reports, Part 2, 4.1, Finance and Budget, 4.1.1, Audit and Risk Committee Activity Report. Moved by Councillor Garrett, second by Councillor Long. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Just before we move on, Mr Benny would like to make a clarification.
Mayor and councillors and those observing, I just want to return to the disclosures of conflict of interest and provide a clarification. In the disclosure that have been submitted this evening, the nature of the interest was described as my wife is a director of the company that owns the property in Benga Avenue, Dandenong. In fact, it should have said my wife is a director of the company that owns a property in Benga Avenue, Dandenong. So with that subtle change, the interest was not in the property that was before the council, it was in a property that was owned in Benga Avenue. On that basis, the type of interest changes from a direct material conflict of a pecuniary interest to a direct material conflict of a non-pecuniary interest. So the declaration has hopefully clarified with that explanation. The Mayor left the chamber for the matter, so nothing needs more to be done than to note the explanation.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Item 4.2, Policy and Strategy, 4.2.1, Quarter 3rd, 2021 to 22, Council Quarterly Performance Report. Moved by Councillor Long, second by Councillor Tan. Are there any questions? Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Under Strategic Objective 4, the report states that the Council has delivered the Small Business Energy Savers Project. How many businesses have been engaged in Dandenong, and how many businesses have we assisted to access the Sustainability Victoria funding for energy efficiency upgrades?
Mr Thorley. Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Garrard. I don't have specifics on numbers at this stage, but can provide those. But I will say that the Small Business Energy Savers Project is a SECA-led project, with the engagement having been undertaken by SECA. Council officers have requested further details regarding the number of businesses that have been engaged in Dandenong, and we'll provide that information to councillors once it's received. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question is that in the report, the Council has stated that, that we are committed to the Resilient Communities Project aimed at enhancing community resilience to climate change in the South East region, the project that is funded by the Mindaloo Foundation. What work has been done on this project, and what internal Council resources has been allocated to the delivery of this project?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Garrard. The Resilient Communities Project commenced last week, and as such the work undertaken is limited at this stage. In terms of council resources allocated to the project, this will be made up of a part of council's annual contribution to SECA, and officer resourcing will be provided through in-kind staff hours. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Is there any further questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Other 4.3.1 draft minutes of Disability Advisory Committee meeting on the 28th of March 2022. Moved by Councillor Dark, second by Deputy Mayor Foster. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 4.3.2, draft minutes of Springvale Community Hub Committee meeting, 13th of April 2022. Moved by Councillor Dark, second by Councillor Lim. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? Did you have a question, Councillor Lim?
Just want to have a comment on that, Mayor. Thanks for that.
Councillor Lim, I'll wait to Councillor Lim. I'll wait to the end of the. I'll wait to the end that you can make a comment at the end of it. Is there any questions, councillors?
Thank you.
Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Councillor Lim. You're on mute, Councillor Lim.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just like to make a comment about our Springvale Community Hub celebration, or any celebration in the future, or any festival in the future, from my personal point of view and also feedback from others as well on that meeting. I think that we have to promote very heavily by marketing, our festival or our celebration. To me, our Springvale Community Hub last celebration very successful, but not as successful as what I expected. If we can some sort of sending all the letter to every leader of each association would be good. And secondly, we should send all the flyers to all business owners in Springvale Activity Centre or any activity centre in our city. And thirdly, we should have digital signage appear on every places like Springvale Library or Community Hub or probably Harmony Square. And finally, the most important, we should send any letter to every school in our city, and especially the letter to the parents through the student. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. We'll move on to the next item, councillors, 4.3.3, a list of registered correspondence to the Mayor and councillors. Moved by Councillor Long, second by Councillor Milkovich. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? Question, Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in regards to the first question, request from Sikh Volunteers Australia for permanent place to station their free food van in Dandenong and Noble Park stations and or other places within the municipality. Can we get an update on that? And has there been any resolution to this letter or request? Thank you.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question there, Councillor Malkovich. We certainly take that question on notice and get you the details. I know that we have received that and we have provided a response, but I can get you further details on that and the other councillors, if you like.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Any further questions, councillors? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. 4.3.4, leave of absence. Councillor Lana Formoso. Moved by Deputy Mayor Foster, second by Councillor Garrard. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 5, notices of motion. There are none. Item 6, reports from councillors, delegated members and councillor questions. Not sure which side I started last time with. Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended a number of events, but I won't go through them. I've got firstly a question without notice to the Acting Director of Planning, and the question is that from time to time I get complaints put through to me by residents about empty properties in their street or in their neighbourhood that they say are allegedly occupied by squatters, bad behaviour, and obviously this affects their residential amenity. And I, for one, Mayor, have always stood up for community safety and improving pride in where we live. So could I ask the Acting Director on matters of this type, what is the best way for residents to report this sort of suspicious activity when they have clear evidence of it? It shouldn't just be, dobbing in neighbours when there's really no substance to it. What details should they report? No addresses, times, dates, whether photos in a public place are accepted or CCTV footage can be provided. Then how these reports are dealt with, and finally whether a summary of just all I've described or like the response to how residents report things could be made available on our website. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor O'Reilly. Like any impacts on our community, an amenity impact or what have you, we just encourage the community to contact our customer service area, put that complaint through there, and it'll go through to the relevant department to action. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got another question actually stemming from what something Councillor Lim mentioned a bit earlier, but I remember I mentioned this a few years ago, Mayor. It's regarding council signage and advertising events. This council's still got the old type of signage, where I've noticed that other councils have that electronic signage that you can change, that automatically changes by computer and that sort of thing. And I remember I first mentioned this maybe 5 years ago, and it was seen to be too expensive then, but technology moves on, things get better and cheaper. Another question without notice to the Director of Business Engineering and Major Projects, who I believe is the responsible director, if I'm not mistaken.
I can try then, Mr. Kearsley, but maybe Mrs. Sprague could add to it because marketing is in Ms. Sprague, so I'll go to Mr. Kearsley first, and if Ms. Sprague's got something to comment. Mr. Kearsley.
Sorry, Mayor. Yeah, so thanks for that, Mayor. So the question is, like, could we just get a do a brief assessment of the cost of that sort of signage, given that it would be more impactful, more efficient. We could get time-sensitive messages across, all sort of centrally controlled and that sort of thing, Mayor.
Mr. Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Mayor. Councillor, just to clarify, I take it it's regarding specific events, or is it broader than that in terms of the type of signage that you'd be looking to get feedback on?
Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I know that Council has a number of signs around the municipality that we use to inform, so not just the one specific for events, but my understanding is that we have a lot of different signs put up generally, like we've got City of Greater Dandenong ones, and we've got other. So it's just like generally taking those from like just being signs to some sort of electronic message board that can then be centrally controlled, so we're really getting messaging out sort of efficiently and the exact messages we want at the exact time. I hope I've explained it as clearly as I can.
Mr. Kearsley.
It's a slight improvement. Yes, thank you. How I would respond is that there are, as we know, particular large screens that are bigger facilities, like this one in Springvale, which clearly are used for events messaging. We do have what I would term a sign package. So for all our parks, shopping centres and those sorts of things. I suppose I'm happy to take that on notice and develop something up in conjunction with Kylie's team. The use of electronic signage tends to be words that can be, moved across a sign to give people information. So there may be other facilities that don't come to my mind at the moment where that sort of thing could well be used. The issue, though, will still be cost in terms of a comparison to a fixed sign and more traditional methods of sending out messages, I suppose. I don't know whether, Kylie, you have anything to add to that, but we can certainly look at that and present something back. I know numerous councils have tried different ways. When I was at the City of Whitehorse, we had particular methods of at the front of the council building, but we've got the signs, the screen, so that would eliminate that as an alternative. But yeah, look, I'm happy to take that on notice. I know where you're heading and what sort of thinking you're putting in, so I don't know whether Kylie you had any
Thank you, Mr. Kearsley. Ms. Sprague.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor O'Reilly, I think you're referring to the community event signs that are quite static and have a very limited opportunity, I guess, to put much detail about events on them. But similar to what Mr. Kearsley said, we do offer a package of different sign and promotion options. But if we can be clear on exactly the sorts of signs you're referring to, then we can certainly go away and investigate the cost of those and come back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Sprague. Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. If you can send an email, I'd like to see those signs as well. So thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Deputy Mayor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So since our last meeting, I've attended quite a few events. There was the Wellsprings annual Iftar dinner, and that was just a lovely event to be able to break the fast with a number of key community members, particularly female community members. And I would also like to wish our Muslim friends a Eid Mubarak and wish them all well. And Also attended the Suburban Revitalisation Program meeting with Noble Park retailers just last week. And that was quite interesting. It was good to get a perspective on how some of the retailers and their thoughts on improving Noble Park and their concerns. So I guess to the officers, watch out for some emails about some of the concerns that were raised. Also attended the SBS election exchange at the Dandenong Market, and I think this was a great opportunity for our residents to be heard on radio. We had a range of candidates for the upcoming federal election being interviewed and hearing their voices and their party's policies. But myself, I was also interviewed by the SBS Hindi radio and asked to share my views on what concerns our residents had, and mainly would be cost of living. And I think we know that COVID has had a significant impact on many of our residents, and so I shared my thoughts of what residents have voiced with me about their concerns. I also attended the 130th birthday celebration at Lapine Dandenong. So it's unusual to celebrate a birthday at a funeral parlour, but it was such a lovely event. It was a very warm and welcoming event, and they celebrated the diversity that we have, the multiculturalism that we have, with a number of dancers and a musician. It was just a great event, and I think Lapine Funeral do an amazing thing in commemorating and celebrating people's lives at such a vulnerable time for loved ones, but also respectfully doing that by acknowledging cultural traditions. So I just wanted to give them a bit of a shout out and a happy birthday. Also attended the annual Interfaith Network breakfast just the weekend with yourself and a couple of other councillors, and that was a lovely opportunity to connect with our interfaith network and have great conversations with them. One only question today, Councillor Mayor Mehmeti. It is without notice. It is regarding Kelvinside Road. I believe a resident has approached me just the other day about it being used as a thoroughfare between Heatherton Road and Corrigan Road, and they're concerned that the speed of the traffic, but also the lack of traffic calming techniques there. So I was just wondering if a traffic report has been done recently, or if not, if that's possible to look into. Thanks, Mayor.
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Kelvinside does ring a number of bells, so I'm sure that we've had further or previous issues raised with regards to the connection between Corrigan and Heatherton. I'll certainly inform traffic engineers to see what recent surveys we may have done and what proposed actions, and see whether it comes up on any of our funding options through Black Spot or LATM studies.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foster. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the great pleasure of attending the Mother's Day event at the Keysborough Garden Kindergarten Primary School, which was a great event, and it was wonderful to see so many parents rock up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that there are such an engaged parent group at that school. And congratulations to Sherry, the principal, and all the staff that were involved in organising the day. It was a tremendous event. It's still great to be around people. It still feels like a novelty. It was great to be at a positive and warm event like that. And, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers and to all parents that do such a great job, including myself. Thank you to my children. I'm sure they would say that. I also attended the Interfaith Network meeting with many councillors here. The Interfaith Network, of which we are also proud in this council, that works so closely with us and, as we know, is the oldest interfaith network. My questions this evening. My first question is in relation to the state budget. So in the recent state budget, $13.5 million has been allocated in 22-23 to deliver a cemetery site in Dandenong. Has this money been allocated to the ecologically sensitive floodplain of Heatherton Road? And part B, have we contacted the local member to ask why a large amount of money has been allocated to a project that both the council and the general public are so opposed to?
Mr Benny.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think that the very short answer to the two questions is no. We don't believe the money has been allocated to the specific project, and yes, we have contacted the local member, and Gabrielle Williams is being extremely supportive and helpful. I can, however, elaborate a bit more on what we do know, what we understand to be the case. And there are 5 things that I think are important. The first is that there is an increasing shortage of burial spaces within this Dandenong region, or more likely, I suspect, the area for which the Southern Melbourne Cemetery Trust is responsible. So that's a given, and I don't think we disagree with that. Secondly, it is understood that the budget references are not new state dollars. They are a restatement of dollars that have been previously announced, and that they are dollars for which the SMCT, the Southern Melbourne Cemetery Trust, is responsible, not the state. And under the requirements of state budgeting, controlled entities such as the SMCT are required to state in the state budget any particular allocations that are being made. The third point is that in that context, this is more of a general allocation rather than a specific allocation. It is not a specific allocation for a specific site, as we understand it to be. We have heard an acknowledgement that the budget papers perhaps did not adequately describe the allocation, and that we are seeking with the Department of Health a further and more detailed clarification that this is a more general allocation and not a specific one to the site that is a concern for many people. There is no evidence at all that the allocation relates to the sensitive site that has been the subject of much public consideration. And finally, I would say again that the local member for Dandenong, Gabrielle Williams, has been most helpful and is herself trying to get greater clarity on this particular allocation. Ms Williams acknowledges that acknowledges the sensitivity of this particular proposal and this particular site, and has, I'm not a spokesperson for her, but she has indicated to me and was happy for me to repeat that she shares many of the concerns of this council, that councillors and that the community hold in relation to that particular proposal. So we are still trying to get more information, but that's as much as we know at this time.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Mr Benny, for your reply. And it is comforting that the local member is also seeking further information. It would be most appreciated from the Cemetery Trust if they were to declare that they are no longer interested in pursuing this site. My next question is about electric vehicle charging stations. Can the council clarify that all our electric vehicle charging stations are charged with fully renewable energy?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I can advise that the council-owned EV charging stations that are not directly connected to their own renewable energy sources and are connected to council buildings, such as the one in Springvale, the Springvale Community Hub, are then connected to council's purchase through the procurement contract that I believe we won a particular award for, that allows for the EV charging stations to be 100% renewable energy. So they are either connected, and in the future we will continue to look at connecting them to solar on a particular building, and where that is not possible, they then are connected to the electrical supply for the building itself, which is 100% renewable.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question is around air quality monitoring, which I know is a subject close to your heart, Councillor Mehmeti. To my knowledge, there is currently only one air quality monitoring station in the whole of Dandenong, which is situated away from the industrial zone. So when the council meets with the EPA, as I understand they are going to do this month, will they be pushing for increased monitoring located closer to the industrial zone? And will the council provide real-time results of the monitoring on the council website or a link from the council website in an easy-to-understand manner?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Garrard. I can confirm that we have, over the last 6 or so months, have met regularly or working increasingly with the management level of the EPA to talk about air and normal emissions issues. And the meeting is a progression of what improved relationship and combined approach we can do to tackle this issue. So our meeting has been confirmed with the EPA and the scientists on the 20th of May. And in our discussions, we'll certainly be pushing for increased monitoring stations closer to our industrial zone and within that interface of the residential areas. As to their specific locations and the reporting technology that comes out of that, we will be working through those details as part of that meeting coming up in the future. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. My next question is, what progress has been made in setting up the task force to monitor air and water quality in the Dandenong Industrial Zone, as per Councillor Mehmeti's notice of motion last year?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks again, Councillor Garrard. Further to the mention in the previous question, the answer to that, we believe that good progress has been made in working increasingly with the EPA on the emissions issue. In essence, the new collaboration with the EPA is already exploring the start of a task force in many other areas, not just in terms of air and emissions, and that this will form a good platform to taking Councillor Mehmeti's notice of motion further. We'll provide more details on the outcomes of these meetings and the response to the NOM in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you. My next question is regarding our waste withdrawal from the Metro Waste contract. We and other 8 councils rightly withdrew from the Metro Waste contract due to a range of financial, policy and environmental risks and conflicts. Therefore, what progress has the council made since in engaging in talks around alternate solutions, and has the state government been engaged in discussions about releasing funds from the State Sustainability Fund to underwrite a waste option for the southeast of Melbourne?
Mr Keasley.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. What I can advise, based on recommendation 7 of the council resolution, is that we have now completely fulfilled the obligation to inform all the members of the board, the Metro Group, a number of government agencies that are involved in waste, DWELP and Sustainability Victoria, including local MPs and relevant ministers. Those letters basically went, I can advise, as of last Friday and as of this morning. We will probably give all of those people maybe a week or so to receive that information, and then we'll be targeting different people at different levels. Certainly the ministers will no doubt be briefed in terms of what response they give, and we'll put an advocacy sort of package together about who we then meet at different levels of government. The first point of call will be our local member and other local members, because it's not just the Dandenong MP, it's others as well. And then we'll really see, based on Council's resolution, what further commitments we can get from a number of different levels. And we're also seeking an update from the board in terms of only having now a smaller number of councils. What is their position with regards to this particular project? So there's a fair bit of information to gather. And I'd be hoping that in the coming weeks we could certainly then advise Council of any information or decisions we may get from a number of those groups.
Thank you, Mr Keasley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. My final question is, did the council inspect the second Springvale Scout Hall? And if so, regarding the findings, did they give the Scouting Association only 3 weeks to come up with $9,000 that is required to fix the side entry ramp into the hall? an amount of money that is beyond the funding capacity of the group and may force cancellations of activities for some time.
Ms Budin.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. So Council received advice from Councillor Dark at the Council meeting on the 28th of March this year that the ramp on the second Springvale Scout Hall required attention. The Scout Hall is owned by the Scouts but located on Council land. So Scouts as owners of the building are actually responsible for maintenance requirements in relation to the building. Upon receiving this advice, Council officers immediately notified the Scouts and requested that they investigate and undertake any works to ensure that the ramp is safe and complies with the appropriate standards as a matter of priority. Council officers have been in regular contact with the Scouts on this matter and understand that the Scouts have had the ramp inspected themselves and that quotes have been provided for the works required. But Council did not impose a 3-week time frame, nor are our officers aware of any impacts on the group's activities.
Thank you, Ms Budin. Councillor Garrard. Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Long.
These are some of the events that I've attended since my last formal meeting. The 30th of April, I attended the opening of the basketball futsu court at St James Church, Dandenong. The 4th of May, I attended a Mother's Day lunch with the Italo-Spanish Club. On the 5th of May, I attended a farewell function for Charles Tavera in Dandenong. The 7th of May, I attended the annual Interfaith Network breakfast in Springvale. I have one question for tonight. Residents have asked me about what is the planning application for number 5 Stud Road, and do we have the planning authority for this application? The residents are worried that it is a boarding house.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Long. I can confirm that the current planning application at 5 Stud Road, Dandenong, seeks a planning permit for the use and development of a 4-storey community care accommodation building. And you're correct, as this site is located in the declared project area of central Dandenong, the Minister for Planning is the responsible authority for determining this application. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on a supplementary, what exactly constitutes a 4-storey activity accommodation facility provider or something on those lines?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Dark. I can confirm I've got a few details here I can read for you if you like. So what is being provided or proposed at the moment is 3 support service consult rooms at the ground level for NDIS allied health providers, 12 medium-term accommodation rooms for stays of up to 90 days at the first floor level, 8 longer stay specialist disability accommodation apartments at the 2nd and 3rd levels, and then with that's associated car parking. But it's really just community care for our disabled people and people with disabilities.
Thank you for that, Mr Thorley. Councillor Long.
Yeah, considering the area is Stud Road near Clough Street, traffic is a nightmare now without having a facility like this there. I'm not against having the facility, but I think it's in the wrong position.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Mr Thorley, do you want to comment on that? So Council is not the planning authority.
We're not the authority.
Yeah. Can we make... we consulted with any? Can we be consulted with that or not? Mr Thorley? Mr Kearsley?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Well, we can certainly provide commentary. We are always asked on planning applications where the Minister is the applicant. There's usually a committee process of relevant officers, whether they be from the Department of Planning, us and sometimes Development Victoria, to consider these. So I can certainly take that on notice and have a discussion with Mr Thorley in Mr Bosman's absence to see whether or not any of that information we can present to the Minister directly and through the Department of Planning.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Long?
I know the residents are going to take up a petition. So do they address the petition to Council and then Council passes it on? or do they do it to the state government?
Mr Kearsley.
Through you, Chair, I would advise that they come through to us initially. We tend to act in some ways as an administrative area as well. And in any instance, if it is to the department, we can forward those on. I would just request that the residents do it within any time frame that they've been notified of with regards to the 14 days.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Here are some of the events I attended to the last 2 weeks. On the 28th of April, I attended the Child and Family Partnership meeting. Also, I just want to inform about, right now we've got a few Ukrainian families been arrived in Greater Dandenong at the moment. I just want to shout out to our Greater Dandenong staff who support them. At the moment, we've got at least 8 children aged less than 5, so they're supporting them to get into childcare and kindergarten. So I just want to shout out to them. Also to the Association of Ukraine Noble Park branch, they did a lot of fundraising and support for the new arrival. At the moment, they're looking to get some fundraising, also donations. So if you have any household items such as tables, anything like that, so please donate to the Association of Ukrainian Noble Park branch. On the 7th of May, I also attended the Oriented Hoi Yan Art, which is the cultural show, with Councillor Shona Raleigh. Well, it's great to see, in the past 2 years now we can have all the different cultural, shows at least alive again. So I just want to say thank you to your organiser. They have done a lot of hard work in the last few years. Even though we have the COVID, they've also done online events in the last 2 years as well. My question tonight, just regarding, I've got a few questions. This issue with tree. This is on Nature Strip. Through you, Mr Mayor, could the relevant officer please at least inform our resident in terms of planting new tree on the Nature Strip? Could we at least send them a letter or inform them about what type of tree would they planting? Because most of the residents are concerned about the big of the tree cause issues on the Nature Strip, on could be on the footpaths. So I've got one is located at Bennett's Court, Noble Park. Just following up on that question.
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, if you send us the particular address, if there is a street particular number, then we can action that. We do have, as compared to trees that were previously planted many years ago, we do have a better list of those in terms of causing problems. So we can certainly advise the resident of the intended tree species and also the timing of planting for that.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Tan.
Thank you. Another tree issue, this is on Buckley Street, Noble Park, so it's been an ongoing issue for a few years. So the resident got issue with it's a few trees and clutter on their roof, mainly, a lot of birds and possums and clutters. So they requested if we can remove the tree and plant something else that's more healthier. Could we have a look on that one as well? It's on Buckley Street, Noble Park.
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. Certainly, if we get the particular address, then we can certainly deal with that. We do have criteria on what we do and don't remove trees for, and we can certainly look at that and advise the resident.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Tan.
Thank you. I'll resend you the actual address. And the third one is on Knockall Crescent, Noble Park. This is in Springvale North Ward. It's a large overgrown tree branch, which is, caused on the Nature Strip. So our officer already went, cut, but the branch, it's a huge tree, so obviously it's more work to be done. Could you have a look on that one as well and get back to me?
Mr Kearsley.
Yes, certainly, especially if we've actually just gone out and done some pruning I will say, however, there can be a difference between what the residents' expectations are and what our arborists are saying needs to be done to maintain the health of the tree. Simply, if you cut too much off on one side, then it has an issue, it may fall down. So we will certainly look at that again. If you can send me the particular details of the address, then we can deal with that particular matter.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Tan.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I only have one question tonight from quite a few residents, actually. In regards to trees again, topic of the night, if the council tree from the footpath or the nature reserve or whatever the case might be heavily overhangs over the property boundary, are they allowed to cut in line with the boundary or not? Like you would with a normal, private residence next to private residence next to private residence? Because there are quite a few people that have asked, they're just not sure if they're actually allowed to undertake the action just to go sort of 90 degrees from the fence line.
Mr Kearsley.
Yeah, look, that's a very good question. I suppose the response I would have is that we would prefer they didn't, but they can certainly come to us, and if the tree is deemed to be inappropriately overhanging, it would allow us to rectify that, and we are pretty quick in getting out and doing that. I suppose the danger is, depending on the nature of the size of what they remove, it can actually impact the tree itself. And you'll find the next rain or the next wind thing topples over because it's not balanced properly. So all I would recommend, understand you can do it, and we've probably all done it with regards to trees that overhang your own property from your neighbour. But I think I would err on the side of caution and just request those residents to come directly through us, and we will act on those requests pretty quickly. And it can then be done professionally through our crews rather than hopefully not seeing a resident on a stepladder attempting it themselves or actually paying for it themselves, whereas something we would do anyway.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. And following on from Councillor Milkovich, I'll start with my first question. I've received a couple of calls from some residents in Bloomfield Road in Keysborough to do with some virgin olive trees that were planted during my last term of council, both in the Keysborough ward and the Noble Park North ward. I know they were planted. The residents in Bloomfield Road that occupy properties where it's on the front yard have had a significant amount of these trees that were supposedly virgin and never going to produce fruit, and a lot of it, I might add. There's been some residents with some utes backing up, climbing on the back tray of the ute, picking the fruit, people with chairs, with ladders, wobbling in people's front yards trying to collect the olives. One of the residents, who's an older lady in her 80s, has been keeping her property quite pristine and neat, has been having substantial issues with the olive trees. I did raise this via an email, and she did actually go to the Parkmore Customer Service Centre and put in a merit. And the arborist did go out and trim a couple of trees off. But is it possible to contact that resident again? And I know, as I said, I did send an email to see what options are available about either further pruning that tree right back, or about potentially doing a Hemming Street level of just moonscaping it and starting from scratch with some trees that actually will look good for the area.
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. Certainly, if we can get details of the particular address and the person involved, we can get our arborists and staff to pop down. I have heard many stories where the trees were not supposed to be fruiting, and then all of a sudden, bingo, you get them. And maybe it's something we can address at the certain time when the fruit shows, so that we don't have people backing their utes up and all sorts of things, that we actually remove them and create our own olive industry, perhaps. But anyway, certainly we can deal with that.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, my next question has been from some residents in Chapel Road, Keysborough, about a childcare centre that's currently under construction. This was an item that was previously raised when I was in Paperbug. What I know Councillor Tan has been a big part of it as well, to do with the local residents who are concerned about the amenity of the childcare centre on the corner. With construction starting, there's been a lot of upset to the residents' nearby amenity. The very, very early starts with a lot of vehicles also parking on the streets, the inability of them to be able to get out of their driveways, particularly those in the bowl of the court. I know I did send this through to the relevant officer, but if we could please have a conversation with Fred, who's the, I suppose, lead proponent, because I know from a phone conversation I had with him today that there are a lot of other residents in the court who are actually echoing the same sort of sentiment as well.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Dark. The Manager of Regulatory Services is aware of this issue and has had his staff out there taking action recently. And we will also take this question on notice tonight and provide you further details and information so that you can pass on to the relevant community members. Thank you, Mr
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, my next question actually was a question that I've been asked to ask on behalf of Councillor Cameron Howe from the City of Kingston. There's been a lot of email correspondence about the River End Road upgrade and the Council's, I suppose, strategy and time work. Given that this sits within, and I did have a look now, the marginal electorate of Mordialloc, and given that we are heading towards a state election as well, is this something that we could put into our state government advocacy to secure some state government funding? The road and the path in which that they want to do, and I can understand where the road needs to be upgraded. I did drive it on the weekend and did see how uneven and unsteady it was. But it would be a significant amount of money to build a path along that sort of route, which in essence, in my opinion, would have very little benefit to the ratepayers, certainly of the City of Greater Dandenong. I think it would certainly be more of a City of Kingston resident used path to see whether we could advocate heavily, particularly as having led up for some additional funding.
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Yes, we have said on a number of occasions to a particular councillor from Kingston, but also I believe to the previous CEO from Kingston, that we're ready to advocate with them at any time, and I would agree leading up to the next election would be the best time to do it. We will be, I believe, presenting, as we did with the federal election advocacy booklet, a similar one for the state government election campaign, and yes, we could certainly put that one onto the list for future briefing of councillors at a CBS to get a view on whether or not that one should be in there. But again, we will and have put out to Kingston and the councillor that if they have meetings with local members, if they have meetings with State Department reps, etc., that we can be part of that as well, and should be part of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and to the obviously, yes, definitely when that comes to CBS, I think that would definitely be a worthwhile project in the lead up to the state election. My next question is from the Keysborough Tennis Club. I raised at the last council meeting with regards to the repair on the gate, and I'm aware that the contractor was coming out to repair the gate. The gate has still not been repaired, and I believe that the repairer came out and put the spring on the wrong way on the gate, so the gate actually doesn't open properly again. Have we organised for this to be addressed with the contractor who did come out to repair the gate? And subsequently from that, do we have an estimated completion date of when the gate will be repaired?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. I believe the gate is scheduled to be repaired tomorrow, being the 10th of May, and I would be asking the relevant officer to give me an indication of its completeness, and also the fact that we're not paying them twice to fix something they should have fixed the first time.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question is to the Director of Engineering as well. On the 29th of April, there was some email correspondence to do with the boardwalk at the Wokta Reserve wetlands, which I believe the contractor constructing the boardwalk has come back to council. There is a delay sourcing some of the key materials for the boardwalk. Do we have an estimated completion date of when we're expecting the boardwalk to be fabricated and installed and ready to be used by the residents?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm aware of that particular issue, and yes, the issue being the contractor not being able to source materials. However, I don't know the particular timing of when it would be done, but I'll certainly investigate that and get that to you.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. My final question before my statements. I had a phone call from Chem Centerplat from the Street Food Turkey Restaurant in Chandler Road, Keysborough. One, he's very thankful for the support from the business department that did go out and have a conversation and see what business programs are available and also what advertising is as well. He has, through that program, applied for outdoor seating and the glass facades and permits, which I believe is imminently ready to go in. He did call me today to say that there is actually a council bin that's been installed that's right in the middle of the path of where the screens are on the permit. Could we please have a look and see whether it's possible to relocate that bin a bit further down away from where the glass frame is intending on going?
Mr Kearsley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. Generally, where there is a council infrastructure in the way of outdoor dining applications, I understand that subject to it being possible, that we generally move bins, and no one wants to be sitting having food where there's a bin right next to you. So I can take that on notice in terms of confirming that, if you could send me the details of the particular shopping strip or the shop. But general practice is that when it comes to seating bins, we do seek to relocate those away from the area where the outdoor dining is.
Thank you, Mr Kearsley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope that all the residents or those particularly mothers, had a fantastic Mother's Day yesterday. It's always good to get out and celebrate, and I did see a lot of people out and about at local restaurants, and particularly local cafes in the area as well. I had the pleasure of attending the Iftar at the Keysborough Mosque in Greens Road. It is actually a very, very well attended event, and I went there thinking that most of the people that would be attending there would actually be Turkish. However, I was surprised to see that the majority of the Albanians actually go there now. A lot of the correspondents, a lot of people actually run into and know, explained to me that apparently the Albanian mosque in Dandenong is for the older generation. The sermons go on for longer periods of time, and the Turkish ones for the younger generation can get in, do their praying, get out quick as, and the car park's a lot easier to get out of. So that was very surprising to see. Mount Hira now has 850 students, and of the 850 students I believe a third of them are Albanian, which is actually one of the key parts of where they're looking at as well. They are shortly actually about to commence the demolition of their old hall, which had been used for many, many years since the school started to grow and the group started to grow as well, and they're building a large function centre to host a lot of the weddings, the Islamic weddings that they're having there as well, and for the Turkish community to go out and celebrate. So it was good to see that in essence, and how that's growing as well with the local community. I just wish to also thank on behalf of one of my residents, Jamie Thorley from I suppose Planning Amenity, or the Detective Thorley as he would be. I had a lot of phone calls one morning from some residents whose whole house had been filled up with smoke. A lot of residents have their windows open late at night, and the smell of burning rubber has been coming quite heavily over Keysborough South and over the Keysborough ward as well. And after a quick couple of calls, I would imagine, to the EPA and other authorities and some investigative work, determined that there was a fire at the back of a factory in Canberra Road that was dealt with by people that were there. And in the very, very rapid speed was able to then relay that back to the resident. So I did have a phone call from the resident thanking me for your assistance there. And my final statement for tonight is just a quick congratulations to Shelley Brown. Shelley Brown is, or has been, heavily involved with the Noble Park Scouts in Mons Parade, heavily involved with the Dandenong Scouts, and as of last week was appointed as the new Chief Commissioner of Scouts in all of Greater Dandenong. So her job is to oversee all of the Scout groups within Greater Dandenong. I believe they're in Councillor Milkovich's or Councillor Long's ward. There's a very large facility there. You've got the Keysborough one on Cheltenham Road, which is currently growing, Moodymere and Second Springvale. And I do know that as a Greater Dan local, she's very keen on seeing the Scouts grow, and that's something that I just wish to congratulate her on her appointment. If we could please write her a letter congratulating her on her appointment, and then just providing any assistance that Council can, that would be great.
Happy to do that, Councillor Dark, and thank you. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Mayor. Last month, I attended Springvale Community Hub meeting, and last Sunday, the 1st of May, I had a great pleasure to involve and also to organize with, with Salvation Army to organize Red Shield Appeal 2022 multicultural launch. It was a very successful one on that night, with Mayor Councillor Jim Amati, Mayor City of Monash, councillors, 2 ministers, and also Member of Parliament from both parties. And not just that, we have so many multicultural community leaders, about over 20 multicultural community leaders in different nationality attended that night. My team and I, and also Venerable Sochie San and his follower, we raised over $11,100 on a Friday, the 6th of May, and also had a great pleasure to sponsor Italian Senior Citizen Club Mother Day celebration. It was a very successful one as well. My first question is this. Last Saturday, I was very surprised to have music dance by 323 Block Party at Springwell Multicultural Place. To relevant officer, did we receive any information from Multicultural Art of Victoria prior to that event or that evening? Because if we knew earlier, I can promote a lot of to our business owner and also to people that come to Springwell to come to join that evening. But we have no idea, and some business owner asked me some question. I simply have no idea as well. Therefore, please let me know, did any relevant officer receive any information from Victoria, Multicultural Art of Victoria or not? Thanks for that.
Ms. Budin.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Councillor Lim. Through you, Mr Mayor. You've correctly identified that's part of the Multicultural Arts Victoria in situ program. And unfortunately, no, we did not receive adequate information about that event until later on. That said, the nature of some of the activities they are doing are pop-up in nature, and so we will be seeing some activities appear with late notice around the municipality. But we do have dates now locked in for a series of events over the coming months, and they're about to be put up on our website.
Thank you, Ms. Budin. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Mayor. And would you mind, Mr. Button, would you mind to inform me prior to that, as long as you receive any information from the Art of Victoria, please inform me, at least I can promote in our Springwell Activity Centre. My second question is this. Probably I've been mentioned even prior to my, from the beginning of my term as well, about the signage in Springwell Activity Centre, especially parking and also toilets. Almost every day, a lot of people come to ask me, where is the public toilet? And some people complain to me that, wow, I went to restaurant to ask their toilet, they refused for me to use their toilet. I don't know where the public toilet is. And also, secondly, they have no idea about where multi-level car park as well. I always, almost every day, I take them to show them where exactly multi-level car park is and or public toilet is. Would it be possible for us to have more signage everywhere in each corner of the street? And if we can do the digital signage by using solar panel, even better. Actually, like Councillor O'Reilly mentioned about that, it would be very obvious and easy for visitors to see where exactly the multi-level car park or the public toilet is. Thanks.
Mr. Keasley.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. Yes, we could certainly take that on board and have a look at exactly where the existing signs are located, and if we need to supplement with new signage where they would be. In terms of digital, that's something that would have to take further on notice due to the imposition of what the cost would be. But let us have a look at what we've got in the centre first, and then we can report back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Keasley. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Mr. Keasley, and thanks, Mayor. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. Some of the places that I attended the Combined Probus Club of Sandown 30th year celebration. Great to meet with the community and celebrate their 30th anniversary. They do some fantastic work within the community. I also attended the opening of the St James basketball futsal court, which is fantastic. This facility is open to the public, so the public can actually book it and it doesn't cost them anything. So it's a great addition to what there was there for many, many years, were the old tennis rundown courts, and now we've got this beautiful basketball and futsal court available to the community. So we thank the St James Anglican Church. I also attended the Salvation Army 2022 Red Shield Appeal, the multicultural launch. Councillor Lim, who plays a very active role in the Red Shield Appeal, and many, many people within our community are very supportive and did raise a lot of funds for the Salvation Army, which we had to travel to Monash, and people were sort of wondering why is the Mayor and councillors from Dandenong in Monash, but most of the people there that had raised the funds were from the city of Greater Dandenong, so that was why we were there. And I told them that they're building their new facility here in Dandenong and should be completed, I think, in August, September this year, so they could have the 2023 Red Shield Multicultural launch in 2023 in Dandenong, so they thought that was a good idea, so look out for that. I also attended the Ramadan Celebration hosted by the Jiangxing Chinese Association and the Chinese Jiangxing Senior Citizen Association. So that was the end of Ramadan Eid festival, so which was good to attend. I attended the 8th annual Interfaith Network Breakfast in Springvale. People are well aware of our Interfaith Network. It's been going on for 33 years now. That time was Springvale City Council was the first in Australia to have a interfaith network, and now we see councils who have copied what we do in our city and replicated that right throughout Australia, which is fantastic, and we love working with the Interfaith Network of Greater Dandenong. I also attended the Rosa Eid celebration, the Uyghur Association of Victoria. Great to attend the Uyghur Eid celebration as well, and it was a beautiful lunch we had there with them. I also attended the Melbourne Afghan Soccer Association in Keysborough last night. Great to have the tournament on. It normally happens around Easter time, but they sort of had to split it up and it went for a little bit longer due to Ramadan, and most of the players had to fast and it was a bit difficult, so they actually didn't play all the games during Easter, but they have these tournaments in Easter and in Christmas time at Tatterson Park, and they get huge crowds. They get over a couple of thousand people at the games, and can you believe it or not, it's 12 actual teams that win the competition were all Afghan players, so normally you can only field 1 or 2 teams, but they had 12 teams, so a great effort to the Melbourne Afghan Soccer Association. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish all our beautiful mothers a happy Mother's Day for yesterday, to the grandmothers, to all the mothers, and I certainly went and had lunch with my mum, and she really appreciated it. And my wife was very busy yesterday. She had a women's-only fundraiser event where 500 women of the community attended to raise funds for an orphanage. So I spent lunch with my mum while my wife was busy raising money for the orphanage. And also to our community that celebrated Eid last Monday. Eid Mubarak to all our community who celebrated. Mr Benny, you've got some questions that we took on notice at the last council meeting.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I can confirm that 9 councillor questions were taken on notice and all have been answered and are tabled this evening.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Item 7, urgent business. If there is no urgent business, I declare the meeting closed at 8:32 p.m. Thank you.